Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Christina, I told you that Mom would only come for a couple of days. That's a couple of days longer than we need. When will you two finally start getting along? It's impossible to reason with either of you. Paulo left the room, upset. He didn't want to talk about it anymore today. His decision about his mother's visit would remain unchanged. We're not finished talking. Christina wasn't going to give up that easily. I am. I love both of you, and I don't want to constantly try to reconcile you. Paulo, I've been trying again and again to appeal to her over for 5 years. I was nice, genuine, gave her gifts. I gave birth to a granddaughter that your mother always dreamed of. And what did I get in return? Rudeness, insults, tons of vile rumors behind my back into my face. And the icing on the cake, a demand for a DNA test to prove your paternity. Don't you think your mother went a little overboard 1,000 times? The woman spoke completely sincerely. 5 years ago, she agreed to marry him after just a couple of dates. Her husband's family welcomed her coolly. They thought their son deserved better than a single mother with a child on her hands. They didn't take into account such trifles as 2 higher educations, a prestigious position before maternity leave, and the prospect of returning to it with a promotion. Her education, high moral principles. In general, in another situation, Christina would never look at Paulo's, who wasn't doing very well in school. But fate gave her a little choice to get married and raise a son in a complete family, or to become a single mother, with neighbors constantly whispering behind her back. Beautiful, smart, and confident Christina always strived to be the best in academics, sports, and dance. There was no one who could match her in anything she put her mind to. The only area that she did not devote time to was interacting with the opposite gender. She seemed to not notice the admiring gazes of her classmates, either deliberately ignoring them or quickly turning boys into friends. During her time in school, she never had a romantic relationship. Her friends could not understand her, as even the most handsome boys were rejected. Suitors gradually found more accessible options and disappeared from her sight. The reason for her behavior was simple. Her father was a drunkard, and her parents had quarrels as a daily routine. Her father's inappropriate appearance and behavior made her decide not to repeat her mother's fate. No man, no problem, she could focus all her time and attention on her studies, career, and self-development. Christina was the only child in the family, so she had no one to share her feelings about this. If she had a close friend or an older sister, anybody would explain that her father's behavior never was normal. There are many worthy men in the world who can create a strong and loving family. Christina, that cute new guy tried to get your number again. Her friends actively tried to intervene in her personal life. Cute guy. Have you seen him? Yes, he's amazing, his figure, face, stylish clothes. Well, so give him your number. You know I'm not interested in that. If I didn't know you since kindergarten, I would have thought you were into girls, laughed her friend. Hey, that's an idea. Let all the handsome boys know I'm interested in you. Christina's friends kept annoying her with almost daily offers, confessions, and matchmaking attempts. Let's not do that. The prom is coming up soon, and I don't need that kind of reputation, Maria smiled. She didn't even know why Christina actively avoided boys. After school, the girl entered 2 prestigious universities at once and was able to combine full-time study at one and part-time at the other. Thus, a few years later, Christina received a law degree and a degree in English and German translation, an ideal combination for working in other countries. Moving to another country was her biggest dream. Thanks to a successful defense of her diploma, she quickly found a well-paid job that involved trips to other countries and the possibility of transfer to one of the foreign branches. All her plans went out the window when she met him. On that day, she had a long workout, and waiting for public transport was almost impossible. Seeing that an expensive car had arrived at the stop, the girl was a little scared. However, a tall, athletic, and very handsome young man got out of the car and offered to give her a ride home. No doubt, she politely declined. Then he parked the car and walked her home. In the hour they spent on the road, they managed to talk about everything in the world. It turned out they had a lot in common: favorite books, music, and a passion for sports. The young man impressed her with his manners. He was well-read, erudite, and attentive. The story began like a cheap novel: beautiful courtship, expensive gifts, and conversations till the morning. Rodrigo was an amazing man. Moreover, Christina had never seen anyone like him. But most importantly, he was the exact opposite of her father, who was an example to her of what a man should not be under any circumstances. It's no wonder the girl fell in love. The feelings that finally captured her heart were so beautiful, new, and exciting that she was ready to do just about anything for her beloved. She invested all the power of her first love in these relationships. Even colleagues, with whom she kept strictly professional relations, began to notice a change in her. "Christina, you seem particularly mysterious today. Has our shy girl fallen in love?" The boss's secretary couldn't hide her excitement, seeing how the girl had changed. At work, they treated the newcomer well, seeing how hard she was trying. Unfortunately, being in love, she didn't notice the obvious. The young man never spent weekends together, tried not to appear with her in crowded places. He didn't introduce her to his friends, and was practically always busy on weekends. A more experienced girl would have guessed the reason for such behavior. The truth opened up to Christina only on the day when she found out she was pregnant and decided to make her beloved one happy. "Rodrigo, I have a very large and amazingly beautiful gift for you." Blushing, the girl said, handing the young man a small box tied with a neat golden bow. "Honey," the sound of this word was so limb-trembling to young lady, "I asked you not to give me gifts. You don't have the financial means for this. Gifts should be given by a man. This is a special gift. I'm sure you'll be happy." However, she read the whole range of emotions on her beloved's face, among which there was no joy, happiness, or excitement. A grimace of disgust and anger distorted his beloved features. He sharply closed the box and threw it on the ground. "I hope this is a joke. Rodrigo, aren't you happy?" The girl was at a loss and didn't know how to react. "You must be mad. Haven't you tried to think with your head? Rodrigo, what's wrong with you? This was unexpected for me too, and it will greatly affect my plans. But this is our child, the fruit of our love. This is the fruit of your endless stupidity. Do you really think I need IT? Or did you do this on purpose? Did you want to gouge me for money? So, the maximum of what you can count on me is a payment for an abortion. After that, you will disappear from my life and the life of my family." "Your family?" "My family. Are you suddenly going deaf?" Christina looked at this rude, cold, selfish man and couldn't believe that he was the same perfect, loving, gentle, generous Rodrigo that she had been dating for almost 6 months. "What do you mean? Are you really that goofy that you didn't understand? I'm married. I'm not going to leave my wife for you and this." The man nodded disgustingly towards the girl's stomach. "I'm not going to terminate the pregnancy. I had serious health problems since school. It's contraindicated for me." The girl spoke in a colorless voice, as if all her vitality had been drained from her in an instant. "Oh, stop it. People like you can breed like cats." Seeing the girl flustered, not knowing how to respond, apparently she wasn't lying about her health, he softened his tone and said, "I'll pay for the best clinic for you. Everything will be done properly and carefully. It won't affect your health in any way. You'll have plenty of time to have more kids for yourself. But this child must not be born. I don't need these problems. My father-in-law is a very big shot. If he finds out that I cheated on his daughter, he'll seek revenge on both you and me." It seemed that he still had some feelings for the girl. His tone became so formal, as if he were selling a car in an exclusive showroom. "No need. I'm not going to demand anything from you. Goodbye." Christina abruptly turned around and headed towards the bus stop. The situation she had just heard left her unable to even cry. Rodrigo wasn't going to let her have the last word. He caught up with the girl, roughly grabbed her hand, and turned her towards him. "It seems like you didn't understand what I said. You will not give birth to this child. How are you planning to raise him with what money? Just a couple of months ago, you graduated without a place to live or any savings. Are you going to rely on welfare? And where will you live with him? With your drunkard father?" The girl had entrusted her most intimate secret to her beloved, the tragedy that had turned their lives upside down because of her father. "Rodrigo, I won't change my mind. If you don't want the child, I'm not forcing him on you. Let me pass, I'm running late. Your son will grow up to be a juvenile delinquent. He will hate you for the life you give him." The man was ready to tear her apart, still squeezing her hand. The girl had serious concerns that he wanted to push her down the stairs. It could be a girl. Christina suddenly realized that all the feelings she had for this person had vanished. "If my precarious financial situation scares you so much, I'm willing to make a bilateral agreement that I won't declare you as the father or ask for money." A strange intuition prompted Christina to protect herself and her future child. "And on the other hand, what are my obligations?" A hint of interest could be heard in the man's voice. "On the other hand, you will never be part of our lives and won't demand contact with the child." "Have you gone mad? Why would I want that bastard? So, have you made up your mind? Let's go." "No, I'll draft the agreement myself, and tomorrow we'll have it notarized. I'm afraid that my competence in this matter will not be sufficient for you. I'll pick you up at 10. They parted almost as enemies. She had never felt so devastated in her life. Her remnants of faith in the decency of men burned away, leaving a disgusting residue on her soul. After all men were the same in her eyes, unreliable, irresponsible liars. She was the only child in the family. Her mother had decided not to have any more children when her father started drinking. The girl loved playing with babies. And now, she was supposed to have her own child. Christina knew it would be very hard for her, but she couldn't bring herself to terminate the pregnancy. The risk was too great, as this child might be her only chance at motherhood. The doctor who was monitoring her pregnancy supported her decision to keep the baby, no matter what. You know, nowadays many women are struggling with infertility. Some had serious illnesses in their youth, some had abortions. Some seem healthy but can't conceive. Finding a man who will accept you with a child won't be impossible, but infertility is not a pleasant issue to deal with. Moreover, the kind of problem you have often resolves itself after childbirth. The body recovers on its own. Don't fret, you're clever, mature, educated, and employed. Some women give birth and handle even worse conditions without worry. Besides, there are support measures for single mothers. You can even stay in a special hostel for a while with your child. Some girls live there for quite a long time. They find jobs and take care of each other's children. I have housing and a job. Plus, I'll be able to return to work after maternity leave. I hope I will. Well, then what doubt is there? But if you change your mind, you have no more than 2 weeks. I have no doubt about my decision. A child doesn't ask their parents to come into existence. If they lack the intelligence to take measures and avoid getting pregnant, the child shouldn't be blamed for it. Christina was glad that at least someone supported her. The second person was her mother. She was worried about her daughter's future but tried not to show it. She promised to support whatever decision Christina made. She managed to explain to her boss that she was willing to work remotely if possible. To come to work for half of the working day after giving birth. Her employer agreed and guaranteed the preservation of her position. The boss didn't want to lose such a hardest working girl so easily. After 7 months, she went on maternity leave, and a month later, on New Year's Eve, the biggest gift and the most anticipated person arrived, her son. As she feared, the father didn't take the news of his grandson very well. While she was working, renting a room, and rarely coming home, he limited himself to insults and mockery. Well, the perfect daughter. Did you get knocked up by your boss for a promotion or find someone easier? Christina tried not to listen to the insults that her father always generously bestowed upon her. It seemed like his supply of nastiness was inexhaustible. However, when the young woman returned home from the maternity hospital with her son, the real nightmare began. Her tipsy father started daily scandals, demanding that she and the baby leave his house. Even the occasional visits from the police had no effect. After 6 months of such a life, she firmly decided to leave her parental home. It was problematic to do so without income and with a child in her arms. That's when her mother offered her a logical solution at that moment: to get married. This option seemed to be the only possible one to her. It would grant her the status of a married woman, put an end to the gossiping of the neighbors, and provide a complete family for the child. However, these reasons were just a cover-up. In reality, Christina was mentally and physically exhausted. She simply couldn't find the strength to come up with any other way out of the difficult situation. One evening, while sitting in the kitchen, they decided that they should choose someone who was calm, peaceful, and a non-drinker. This way, there was at least some hope that her husband wouldn't turn out to be a replica of her father. Fortunately, there were plenty of interested suitors. Among them, she chose the one whom she deemed the most worthy. Paulo lived in the neighboring district and worked as a car mechanic. After barely finishing high school, he joined the army. After that, he worked for himself for several years, often changing jobs. He didn't have enough stars from the sky, Christina's mother would often say. But most importantly, he got along well with little Sandro, who wouldn't let anyone else hold him except for his mother and grandmother. Paulo was ready to get married, and the presence of a child didn't bother him, so they didn't postpone the wedding. After a modest ceremony, the young family moved into Paulo's apartment, which his grandmother had given him during his school years. It was unusual for the woman to wake up and fall asleep without the shouts and insults from her father. Her husband was indeed calm but slightly jealous. She attributed it to his lack of self-confidence. Paulo got on well with their son, treated her with care and tenderness. The woman simply couldn't believe her own happiness. The only thing that bothered the young woman was her future husband's mother. She didn't hide her contempt towards the young woman, despite the fact that it was her son who was unworthy rather than the newlywed daughter-in-law. The woman believed that this despicable young woman had seduced her poor son and forced him to marry her. After the wedding, she came to the newlyweds' apartment and caused a disgraceful scandal with insults and broken dishes. The husband did not stand up for Christina, justifying his mother's behavior by saying that she had always been jealous of him for his girlfriends. Such behavior became the norm in their relationship. Calm and attentive on ordinary days, the husband would change drastically when his mother was around. His mother made him obey her. That's why Christina decided to minimize contact with her husband's relatives. Neither she nor her son attended any of their family celebrations. The situation could have changed when Christina and Paulo had a daughter. They went to visit their parents to introduce them to their granddaughter. The newly minted grandmother couldn't hold back for long. She doesn't even resemble us. One child was from another man, and now she's brought another one from a different man. Paulo, aren't you going to say anything? Mom, stop it. These are my children, and don't you dare insult me and my wife with such insinuations. It was clear that the man reluctantly intervened. Since childhood, he had been trained not to contradict his mother. Oh, God gave me a daughter-in-law whom's sleeping around. And here's our eldest, our first daughter-in-law, smart, beautiful, educated. They live abroad, have a prestigious job. She doesn't bring her husband children from other men. The last statement filled Christina's cup of patience. She gathered the children and left her husband's parents' apartment with a firm intention never to see these people again. 3 years have passed since then. The children started going to kindergarten, and the woman was able to return to work. Fortunately, her 2 higher education degrees and excellent knowledge proved useful. Christina no longer attempted to establish contact with her spouse's relatives, and Paulo visited them alone. Recently, his older brother and his wife returned. They had not bothered to attend Paulo and Christina's wedding. After their return, they made no attempts to communicate or even get acquainted. A year after the birth of their daughter, Dalia, Christina's father has gone, and her mother finally had the opportunity to live for herself. Multiple attempts to divorce her alcoholic husband resulted in beatings and harassment. One time, the father almost set fire to the apartment where the mother was living after leaving him. After that, she stopped trying to leave and focused on simply surviving. Christina supported her mother financially, and in turn, her mother greatly helped with the grandchildren. The children were unaware that, besides their beloved grandmother, they also had another grandmother, grandfather, and uncle. Conflicts periodically arose within the family. The husband was jealous of the woman's colleagues, believing that she had only taken a job to find another man. The woman knew the origin of these accusations came but tried to smooth over the conflicts. Within a year, she achieved significant career success through persistence, hard work, and a vast wealth of knowledge. However, her husband's mother had her own version regarding Christina's fast and successful career. "Son, be careful passing through the door, you'll ruin them with your horns." Jokes of this kind became the norm in communication with Paulo. "Mom, I've already told you, I don't appreciate such accusations." "What accusations?" "I'm telling you straight up. Your wife sleeps with the right people, that's why she's climbing up the career ladder." "Mom, first think then talk. She has 2 higher education degrees. During her maternity leave, she studied with textbooks every day to not forget everything she learned. Besides, she also works from home on top of that, writing thesis papers for students. I earn several times less than her, and by the way, she was the one who bought gifts for everyone for every occasion." "Well, let her choke on them, I don't want anything from her." The woman demonstratively threw expensive gifts, which her son brought as an anniversary gift, into the trash can. "Mom, by the way, those are expensive things. They cost as much as my monthly salary. If you don't want to use them, give them to someone else. And, in the end, please, pity my father. Because of your enmity, he also doesn't get to see his grandchildren. Why should he look at other people's children? Check out, there's a whole bunch of kids playing in the sandbox by the entrance. Choose any of them and sit there, enjoy." At times, Paulo looked at his mother and couldn't understand how a person could be so rotten. And how has his father endured being with such a woman all these years? "Mom, I forbid you even to hint that Dalia is not my daughter. You can forbid things in your own home, but here I'm the host. Although, even in your own home, you're afraid to say a word. You know, Mom, I learned that from Dad. He's also been afraid to say a word back to you his whole life. See, this meanest snake wants to deliberately separate us. To make you stop communicating with your parents and family. She's turning you against us, what a vixen. She doesn't even think about you. She only buys gifts on holidays and tries her best. You're not needed by her. Your brother came 2 months ago, have you even met him? No. And it's because this skank doesn't allow you to. She deceives you, fool, and she's happy that she's distanced you from your family." "Mom," Paulo tiredly sat down in the chair. "Rosendo himself doesn't want to meet. I've tried several times, but he always finds a reason to refuse. Either he's too busy, or his spouse has other plans, or they have another medical examination. It's unclear why they returned. It's as if they couldn't find suitable doctors abroad. Stop talking like that. Gabriella is trying to give us an heir. She's seeking treatment and doesn't lose hope. Not like your rat, she gave birth, God knows from whom, and you're happily counting everyone as yours. It's good that I convinced you to not list her elder son as yours. Well, you know that Cristina refused to change Sandro's documents and list him as my son. You couldn't influence that situation in any way. And it doesn't matter to me that he has a different last name, I love him as my own. You love everyone as your own, except your own relatives. Paulo's mother wasn't going to let her unloved son have the last word. From early childhood, she divided her sons into the smart and beloved one, and the second, the failed one. Rosendo, her adored, intelligent, and talented boy, was the epitome of an ideal son. He excelled academically, participated in sports, read extensively, won prizes in numerous sports competitions and intellectual Olympiads. He never argued with or disappointed his mother. After university, he landed a successful job, and a few months later, he married the daughter of his boss, which proved to be an even more advantageous move. The marriage was unequal, but the bride's father saw potential in his son-in-law. A year after the wedding, the young couple moved abroad, where the capable Rosendo became the head of his father-in-law's company's branch. The only shadow over their otherwise perfect marriage was the absence of children. The young wife sought treatment in renowned clinics, undergoing endless examinations. Her husband only underwent an examination once, reasoning that he was fine in that regard. The second son, Paulo, was not particularly favored by his mother. He was disobedient and quarrelsome. He did poorly in school, and in his free time, he preferred chasing pigeons in the yard rather than sitting with books. He had no interests, he barely finished school. Both his parents and his brother tried to influence him, but it had no effect. The mother didn't consider her younger son worthy of her attention, so she reacted rather coldly to the idea of him getting married. Everything changed when she personally met the future younger daughter-in-law. At the time, when his brother got married and moved abroad, Paulo was serving in the military. It turned out that the brothers hadn't seen each other for many years, and Rosendo showed no desire to rectify that. The beloved son was a frequent guest at the parents' house, but never crossed paths with his younger brother there. As soon as Paulo mentioned that he intended to visit them, the older brother would find 1,000 reasons to postpone the visit. Paulo was hurt by such contemptuous treatment, but he couldn't do anything about it. One day, the father quietly said that the older son and mother had some secrets, and they concerned Paulo's family. "Son, Christina, and you must be careful. This couple has something bad planned." And suddenly, Paulo's mother decided to change her long-standing anger to mercy and visit her younger son. And not just visit, but stay overnight. She had no intention of asking her daughter-in-law for permission. She didn't even really inform her son, she presented it as a fact. After their father's warning, Paulo was wary of his mother's initiative. However, the most challenging part was convincing his spouse to accept such an unpleasant relative in their home. "Christina, I told you, Mom will only stay for a couple of days." "A couple of days is already longer than we need." "Well, when will you two finally start getting along peacefully? It's impossible to reach an agreement with both of you." "No one has ever tried to reach an agreement with me. For many years, I've had to listen to a barrage of dirty words about my infidelity, about how I've put horns on you, how I gave birth to Dahlia from who knows who and burdened you with a son. By the way, you knew I had a child before our wedding, and it didn't bother you. If this thing was so important to you, why didn't you tell me everything before we got married? Because I loved him as my own from the very first day, they are equally dear to me. And people say he looks like me. Don't change the subject. I don't want to see in my home someone who has spoken so many dirty words about me. At the very least, I demand an apology from her. This is my home too, don't forget. I have the right to welcome my relatives here. Your mother is practically here every day. Yes, because she brings the children from daycare, takes care of them while we're at work. Or have you forgotten who has helped us raise such precocious children? And who praises at every opportunity what a wonderful son-in-law she has?" To this, Paulo had nothing to object. He was awfully lucky his wife's mother helped him a lot with the children. She cooked, took the children out for walks. He couldn't imagine how they would manage without her. That's why he didn't mind that his wife fully supported her mother with her own salary. And Paulo himself wanted to help his second mother. He personally did the apartment renovation after his father-in-law passed away. The living space was completely transformed because previously it lacked even basic amenities. The man himself understood perfectly well that his mother's visit was a bad idea and it would end poorly. However, due to his character, he couldn't give in. "You can invite anyone you want. I am not obligated to even speak to her." The size of the apartment allows us to avoid seeing each other. On the day of her mother-in-law's expected visit, Christina tried to prolong her time at work as much as possible. Christina's mother picked up the children from daycare herself, and they decided to leave them with her. Paulo didn't object, fearing that his mother might say something inappropriate in front of them. Sandro was already a big boy and could understand why he was called not their biological child. Christina was tempted to stay overnight at her mother's place as well, but she knew that her despised mother-in-law would consider such an act as cowardice. And she was never a cowardly woman, so after spending as much time as possible at work, finishing all her accumulated tasks, she calmly took the longest route home. She had never felt such a burdensome reluctance to go home in her life. Usually, she hurried home from work, looking forward to spending time with her beloved family. Today, she faced a serious challenge, but she had no intention of hiding from her mother-in-law. Moreover, she was on her own territory and could always throw the detested relative out. Opening the door carefully, Christina entered the apartment. It was quiet at home, and she even thought that her mother-in-law had changed her mind and hadn't come to their place. However, just a minute later, she heard muffled voices coming from the living room. Her mother-in-law and husband were having a conversation about something. Christina didn't mean to eavesdrop, but as she headed towards the bathroom, she heard Paulo's mother say her name, and involuntarily, she listened attentively. "I'm telling you, you're Christina," the mother-in-law finally called the bride by her name. "She gave birth to Sandro with your brother, knowing that he was married. She wanted to destroy their family and marry him. She demanded money to keep silent, so that his wife wouldn't find out anything. That's why they didn't attend your wedding. I was afraid that this deranged would ruin his life. I saw them together several times, since she was having a fling with him. That's why I couldn't accept her. She almost destroyed one son's family, and now she targeted the other. If you had your own children, you would understand me. I do have my own children. One more comment like that, and you'll be going home. There are no buses going, or are you going to kick your own mother out onto the street like a dog?" However, this time the woman didn't come to slander the bride. She had a plan, and it was necessary to poach younger son. They're having problems now, they can't have children. So, I thought, why don't you give Sandro to Rosendo and his wife? He is his son after all, and it doesn't matter whether you'll still have a girl or have more children. Your sow gives birth on demand. Maybe at least this one will be yours. Mom, stop it. I've already said that I won't tolerate this kind of behavior. Why didn't you tell me earlier that Sandro is my nephew? How could you know everything for so many years and keep quiet? And how did you come up with this idea? Taking a child away from his mother? And that's where you'll help us. We need to make Christina out to be a bad mother. Then we can conduct a DNA test, prove paternity, and take the child away. Inappropriate fulfillment of her parent duties, a loose lifestyle, your wife fits that description. And then you will testify in court, Christina abused her children, was out of control, didn't take care of them. I'll write you what to say and how to say it. Christina is a wonderful mother, anyone can tell you that. A wonderful mother who dumped her children on their grandmother? As you can see, I am well informed. So that's why my brother didn't want to see me? Paulo attempted to change the subject. Why would he want to see you? You never got along, you were never good enough for him. What would you talk about? And your little snake could have seen him. Everything is perfect in their family, except they're missing a child. And here you have a ready-made grown-up boy, no need to wash diapers and ruin your figure with childbirth. Paulo listened to his mother and couldn't believe his ears. She was discussing the fate of her grandson as if he were a meaningless object. Mom, don't you care about what I, Christina, and Sandro think about this? Who's going to ask you? The boy will have a chance to grow up in a normal family with money and opportunities. What will you offer him? Your stupid swimming and sculpting activities? Don't make me laugh. You should be grateful that your brother is doing you such a favor. Well, let's say you don't care about our feelings. But what about Rosendo's wife? Will Angelina be fine raising a child that her perfect husband fathered with his mistress? If I calculated correctly, Rosendo started having a fling with Christina just a few months after his wedding. I doubt she was his only affair. Christina didn't know he was married. She told me their story and how despicably my brother behaved, forcing her to have an abortion. He didn't want a child back then, but now he's changed his mind? Christina knew that Rosendo was married. She clearly did this on purpose. Christina stood behind the door, unable to believe what she had heard. The whole story felt like a plot from a trashy movie, to have a child with one brother and marry another. How small the world can be. And how unlike the brothers were. She couldn't have imagined that the perfect Rosendo, her husband's elder brother whom her mother-in-law had spoken so highly of but never allowed her to meet in person, turned out to be the very Rodrigo she had fallen in love with many years ago. The one she had idealized and who had treated her so horribly. She quit thinking about him a long time ago. After all, if not for him, she wouldn't have her son. Only for this, she could have forgiven and forgotten him. And now, her mother-in-law had conceived a horrifying and repulsive plan that could destroy her family. Her life. She knew Rodrigo's capabilities. He could bribe whoever was necessary and obtain all the required documents to take her son away. There remained a faint hope in the agreement he had signed upon learning of her pregnancy. But for someone like him, a petty piece of paper would hardly be an obstacle. Christina put her hands to her temples, feeling the blood pulsating in her veins so strongly that it seemed the thinner vessels would burst. The reason for her mother-in-law's intense hatred towards Christina was now becoming clear. The old woman feared that her precious son would be cast aside by his newfound wealthy relatives. For many years, she had taunted Christina, claiming that she had given birth to another man's daughter. Also, it seemed like both of her children are genuine grandchildren for this heartless woman. What a monster now sat in her living room. For many years, they had hidden from her the fact that the man she loved, who had betrayed her and whom she had tried not to remember, was a close relative of her husband. Good thing was that her husband was also unaware of this secret. It seemed that her mother-in-law and her beloved son had kept this information for a rainy day. But how could they have come up with such an idea? To take Sandro away from her? Christina never doubted that her mother-in-law was devoid of human feelings. As for Rodrigo, she had tried to forget about him for many years. Christina did not expect such a move from him. During their last meeting, when they made the agreement, he had shown no desire for further contact. Perhaps the idea came from her mother-in-law, as Rodrigo and his wife had been unable to conceive for many years. Perhaps her mother-in-law wanted to preserve their family but didn't want an outsider, a child from an orphanage, to enter it. However, what was most terrifying was that the woman decided to cunningly slander her daughter-in-law, gather evidence of her incapacity, and take the child away. Apparently, her mother-in-law didn't consider that this would destroy the younger son's family. The eldest son was always the most important to her. Paulo had grown up like a blade of grass in a field. His birth had not been planned. And his mother had never even tried to hide from him the fact that she had made numerous attempts to get rid of the unwanted pregnancy. And now she was trying to destroy her son's family. In any case, justifying such a monstrous act was impossible, and Christina decided to put an end to the conversation between her mother-in-law and Paulo. She entered the room at the very moment when her husband was running out of arguments and simply wanted to kick his mother out. Over the years of marriage with Christina, he had become so tired of his mother's constant attacks on his family that he was ready to cut ties with her. And that monstrous proposal she had made to him couldn't be understood or forgiven. Get out of here. And never come close to my home and my family again, or I'll tear you to pieces. Even if I end up in prison, I'll come out and continue living in a beautiful world that will be free from a disgusting snake like you. Christina grabbed her mother-in-law by the elbow and finally let out the accumulated resentment and anger that had built up over the years. Let me go. Paulo, get this crazy woman away from me. Mom, you're the one to blame. She hasn't done anything to you. For the first time, her husband openly stood up for Christina and went against his mother. I'll destroy both of you. You'll be left with nothing, with no children. I'll take away your jobs, your money, and your home." The crone shrieked like a madwoman, showering her son and his wife with curses. Christina, almost by the collar, dragged her mother-in-law to the staircase, ignoring the screams and curses that the woman continued to unleash. Slammed the door shut, Christina slid down the wall and broke into tears. There had been so much sorrow and hatred in her life, but she certainly didn't deserve such treatment from her mother-in-law. And now she cried out of helplessness, realizing that this vile woman would never leave them in peace. Her husband stood in the hallway, bewildered, not knowing what to do, whether to comfort his wife or rush to deal with his mother, whose screams were heard throughout the building. Neighbors had already started to respond to the wailing and pleas for help. Paulo heard that people were approaching her with offers of help. "This lunatic hit me on the head. She broke my arm, insulted me with her last words. I barely escaped alive from her. Good people, please call an ambulance and the police. We can't leave it like this." After these words being said by Crone, Christina lifted her tear-streaked face to her husband and said, "It's time for you to choose. Either you defend the family and somehow influence Mother right now, or you stay with her and leave forever. I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. Tomorrow, I will file a report against her with the police, and believe me, I will include everything, the insults, the slander, and the attempts to take our child away." Paulo couldn't believe that his own mother was capable of treating his family so maliciously. He had always felt and known that he wasn't the favored child. A constant disappointment, that's what his mother always called him. Against the backdrop of his successful, intelligent, ambitious brother, he had always been an annoying factor. "There's always one black sheep in the family," his mother was sighing in response to teachers' complaints about his poor grades and behavior as a teenager. And he had wanted her to be proud of him so badly. He had chosen the most beautiful and intelligent woman as his wife, hoping that his mother would appreciate her. But she had attacked Christina with such hatred, as if Christina had done something terrible to her. And now, today, he learned the reason behind such treatment. He couldn't comprehend how such an idea could have entered his mother's mind in the first place. From the very first day, he had loved little Sandro and couldn't imagine his life without him. Disregarding his opinion, his mother decided to preserve the family of his elder brother, while destroying the happiness of his own family. It felt like everything he had built over the years had collapsed within his soul at that moment. He was faced with losing half of his family, and he truly couldn't decide which half should he choose. The thought of life without his wife, his daughter, and his son, who also happened to be his biological nephew, was terrifying. But breaking all ties with his parents and his brother was equally frightening. He felt the deepest regret for his father, whom he knew his mother would forbid any contact with. Taking a deep breath, Paulo stepped onto the staircase, grabbed his mother's hand, and forcefully dragged her towards the exit. As soon as they were outside, he pushed her onto a bench and unleashed the emotions that had been boiling up inside him over the years. "Mother, I warn you for the last time, leave my family alone. If you even dare to do a fraction of what you planned, I swear, you and Rosendo will regret ever coming up with such a thing. I will crush you both to dust. Believe me, I have the means to do it. Shall I remind you that my wife is a successful lawyer? And you have no idea how many big shots bring their cars to my auto repair shop. I will talk to all of them. And it's about time my brother's wife learned about his dishonesty. Although, perhaps her father should find out first. If I recall correctly, he's not an insignificant person in town. Let him influence his son-in-law. Maybe then his daughter's horns will stop growing so rapidly." "How dare you?" hissed his mother. "Who do you think you are? You are nothing compared to your brother. A failure. A nobody. An empty space. Nevertheless, this empty space will protect his family. Sandro is my son. I had long planned to adopt him. Now I will definitely do it. We have a perfectly happy family. I forbade you from doing it." It seemed that the woman didn't even entertain the thought that her spineless younger son would dare to disobey. "You won't believe it, But I have no intention of obeying you, Paulo said with a laugh. It felt to him like he had been silent for so many years and now he had the right to speak up. He wanted to say it all. DNA will still show that Rosendo is his father. Yes, and it will also show that we are relatives. In addition to that, Christina has a commitment signed by your elder son, stating that he does not claim her child. Don't tell me you didn't know about it. I knew. But that silly girl wrote it herself. I never believed it had any legal power. It's notarized, so your beloved son has no rights over Sandro. I will still make sure they take Sandro away from you. They need a child. And then it finally dawned on Paulo, the whole plan with the child was devised by his mother. Rosendo might not have been aware of it at all. Clearly, there were major problems in his family, and mother couldn't miss playing an important role in it. Mom, do they even want to take him? Have you asked for their opinion? Rosendo knows, but he's not particularly thrilled about the prospect. He doesn't want children. However, his spouse has started gathering documents for adoption, and Sandro is a perfect fit for them. He's not some orphan with the genes of alcoholics. Your Cristina, of course, isn't the best option either, but we don't have a choice. Paulo was so horrified by what he heard that he sat on the bench, holding his head in his hands. Mother, do you even hear yourself? People are not dolls, you can't manipulate the lives of living beings like this. Sandro is still a child, have you thought about him? He has loving parents. Do you want to take him away from us and subject him to tremendous stress? And then you'll give him to people who don't really want him? Not to mention that you'll destroy our family, break the law multiple times, and waste a lot of money and nerves. Is it really worth it? Let my brother and his wife adopt a child from an orphanage instead, where children live for years without parental love and care. And be glad that at least one child can escape that system and find a family. I didn't give birth to those whelps, and I don't intend to pity them or raise them. I had enough of you. Although maybe I should have taken you to an orphanage too. Perhaps they could have made something good out of you. For the first time in his life, Paulo realized how much of a monster his mother was, indifferent, cynical, and despicable. And he had even tried to encourage his wife to establish contact with her. He should have cut ties with her long ago, but deep down, he hoped that she would love him and be proud of him. When Dolly was born, he hoped that the arrival of little granddaughter would soften his mother's heart. How wrong he was. Her suspicions about Christina giving birth to a daughter from another man were just a smokescreen. In reality, pleasing his mother was simply impossible. Besides her beloved elder son, she loved no one else. Mother, I no longer want to discuss this with you, but I warn you, if you meddle in my family, beware, I will forget that we are relatives. My son and my daughter are more important to me. I will protect them from you by any means available to me. The man walked home with his head down. He couldn't believe that from this day on, one of the most challenging periods of his life would begin. He had no doubt that his mother would not calm down. They had to prepare, consider all the details. He and Christina needed to build a strong wall to defend themselves against such an enemy as his mother. When he entered the apartment, his wife was still sitting on the floor in front of the door, devastated. She was no longer able to cry. Paulo lifted her up and helped her reach the couch. To calm her down, he rocked her in his arms for a long time, like a little child, until she fell asleep. At that moment, he decided that he would protect this woman from any harm, even if it came in the form of his own mother. Rodrigo had been in a bad mood since morning, with work going poorly, and he considered himself to be the one to blame. For several years now, he had been trying his best to prove that he was not just the husband of the company's owner's daughter, but an excellent professional. Moreover, he had to maintain the image of the perfect family man, and in a marriage of convenience, it becomes difficult, if not unbearable, even in the first years of marriage. And on top of that, his wife, with her fantasies, decided to become a volunteer. Not only did he constantly have problems with his mother, but now this as well. He quickly realized that achieving something in this life can only be done by moving in unconventional ways. Flattery and family connections were not a bad option. When Rodrigo found out that the CEO had a daughter, he quickly calculated the shortest path to becoming a top manager in the company. Angelina, an attractive but naive woman, quickly fell for his charming advances at one of the corporate events. Rodrigo knew how to win a woman over and successfully pursued his plan. Just a month later, the spoiled girl was ready to be eating out of his hands, so to speak. And another month later, Rodrigo and Angelina got married. To solidify his success, Rodrigo did his best at work to show his future father-in-law that he deserved to be part of the family. However, the new relative was in no hurry to trust him with any significant position. The stunning and well-groomed woman had only one flaw that irritated Rodrigo terribly: she desperately wanted to have children. And despite all his efforts, she couldn't fulfill this whim. "My dear, you're still so young. Why would you ruin your figure with pregnancy at such an age? Let me buy you a trendy dog or another stylish pet, and you can take care of it. A child means screaming, runny noses, and dirty diapers. Why do you need that? To hire a trendy nanny?" He suggested. "No nannies, I plan to raise our child myself." "In case you forgot, I'm a certified child psychologist," she replied. "I know how much your father paid for that diploma," Rodrigo thought to himself, but he said out loud, "I have no doubt about your pedagogical talent, but I believe we can have children later, around the age of 35 to 40. Are you out of your mind? The older the mother, the higher the chances of having a child with disabilities. Are you willing to take responsibility for the birth of such a child?" She exclaimed. "I never planned to take responsibility for a child," the young husband thought, but he said, "Darling, we can't have a sick child. We're both healthy and take care of our health." Just about a year had passed since their lavish wedding, and the young husband was already seen in the company of stunning beauties. Then another one, and another. While Angelina went through one examination after another at the clinic, her loving husband was actively cheating on her with other women. Eventually, her father's patience ran out, and he sent the young couple abroad. The motivation was more than worthy: examinations by the best specialists. And Rodrigo was offered to head one of the European offices. The position he had dreamed of turned out to be a fiction in reality. The manager had no voice, couldn't sign documents, and had to consult with his deputy, who was essentially the office leader, on all important matters. Angelina's father could easily destroy his son-in-law by telling her about all his affairs. However, he had raised her alone. Her mother had passed away when Angelina was only 3 years old. In an attempt to replace her mother, the father tried to shield his beloved daughter from all the misfortunes. He couldn't find the strength to tell her that her beloved husband didn't love her and had married her for ulterior motives. As soon as the young son-in-law demanded expanded authority, evidence of his wild city life was provided to him. "Do you recognize anyone here? There are at least 5 different girls, 2 of whom are not known for their high morality. How do you think your wife will react to these photos?" The father asked. "I can prove that they're photoshopped." "Angelina can't leave me," he replied. Rodrigo tried to put on a brave face, but the shock from what he saw in the photos stayed with him for a long time. He could lose everything he had worked so hard for in an instant. Suddenly, Rodrigo became attentive and kind to his wife, accompanying her to endless medical appointments and undergoing numerous tests. Her strong desire to have a child greatly irritated Rodrigo, who had never planned to burden his life with such an obstacle. Screaming, helpless creatures constantly demanding attention did not evoke any tenderness or sympathy in him. He had no intention of ruining his life with the arrival of a child. Besides, the infamous glass of water in old age didn't bother him at all. He had planned to earn well enough in his life to afford both the glass and a caregiver to bring it to him. In general, he didn't envision such things at all. Everything in life came easily to him. From childhood, he was accustomed to the idea that his mere presence was already a source of happiness and celebration. His mother adored him, and with the arrival of his younger brother, she found a daily reason to praise one and belittle the other. Over time, Rodrigo began to treat his brother as a servant. The simple-minded and naive Paulo was a toy in Rodrigo's hands, and their mother never tired of supporting Rodrigo in his pursuit of wealth and luxury. And now, just recently, his mother shocked him with an unbelievable piece of news. It turns out she had come up with a solution to their problem with Angelina. At the moment when his mother solemnly revealed her plan, Rodrigo felt like she had completely lost her mind. It turns out that one of his former flings had given birth to a child. He vaguely remembered sending some naive fool for an abortion, but she refused. And now, his mother decided to take that child away from its parents so that he and Angelina could adopt it. His beloved wife had expressed her desire to adopt a child to her mother-in-law. At that moment, his mother conveniently remembered that 5 years ago, her son had shared a problem with her. His pregnant girlfriend had decided to keep the baby. Apparently, his mother had been keeping an eye on that girl, but Rodrigo ran into trouble at that time. His father-in-law sent them abroad. They didn't even come home for his younger brother's wedding. Their mother dissuaded them, saying that the wedding wasn't worthy to see. And now, his mother decided to surprise him with some sort of good news. "Son, I haven't told you everything. You and Angelina can adopt not just any random child with unknown genetics, but your own son," she said. "Mom, are you out of your mind?" Her son's voice became harsh and rough. "You misunderstood me. I'm talking about the child that the girl had by you, your child. Remember, before you left, you told me that some girl was pregnant with your baby and refused to take the money you gave her to get rid of it? And what, you're in contact with her? I wish I weren't, but I can't avoid it." The woman exclaimed with hatred. "That cunning wretch is married to your brother. Are you kidding? How is that possible? I wish I could know. It seems like he was making a pass at her during their school years, then he went off to the army, and after that, they met somewhere again, and he continued to pursue her. She didn't even notice him in school, but after she gave birth, she must have become less picky. They hastily planned a wedding. Then she quickly gave birth to a daughter for him, so Paulo wouldn't run away. All right, enough of your interesting story about my brother's family happiness. Get to the point. Well, now they are raising your son. And Paulo didn't even know that Sandro is his nephew. I'm sure his wife didn't realize it either. You two don't even look alike. Didn't the same last name surprise her? Yes, even back then, I knew Christina had no brains. Wasn't her father an alcoholic or something? Yes, that's her. She got married later to the first person she met just to leave home with her offspring. Her father passed away a long time ago. Well, what's the purpose of telling me all this? The point is that your brother and his sluttish wife have another child. We can take their older son away from them and let you and Angelina adopt him. Mom, you're talking about it as if he's a kitten. Besides, why do I need proof of my cheats? My father-in-law will annihilate me. I'll help you. We'll take him away from them, place him in an orphanage, and then you and your wife can take him from there and leave the country again. The mother beamed with pride, thinking that her plan was perfect. She had tried so hard, putting all her efforts into making her beloved son happy. That day, he managed to convince his mother that the idea was incredibly foolish. They must never let his wife find out that he had cheated on her with other women. She naively trusted him and thought that he genuinely loved her. It seemed that the mother was briefly calmed down, but it only lasted for a week. As it turned out, she had spent that time running around to organizations whose competence was taking children away from parents. The task was simple, to prove that Paulo and Cristina were terrible parents. Sandro's life was in danger, and the child needed to be taken to an orphanage as soon as possible. The woman never considered the fact that her son had 2 children, and both could be taken away. She only cared about one grandchild, and even then, only as a means to keep her elder son in the happy marriage she had orchestrated. From the outside, it appeared to be a happy marriage, but even the mother knew that her son didn't value his wife at all. At that moment, no one paid attention to the woman's intense determination to carry out her plan. Later, the family would bitterly regret it. After hearing what his mother had planned, Rodrigo spent several days desperately trying to come up with a way to divert her attention to something else. He forbade his wife from interacting with his mother, citing health problems as the reason. "My dear, it would be better not to communicate with my mother in the coming days. She seems to be experiencing some strange seasonal exacerbation. She must have been under a lot of stress lately, and your news about adopting a child seems to have finally affected her sanity. What's wrong with her? Is it something serious? Maybe she needs a doctor? I'll pay for any specialist," his wife exclaimed. "There's no need to pay for anything. Sometimes she has strange thoughts that she presents as if they're real events. It has happened before, just ignore her. Okay? Well, I don't know. I'm worried about her. She's always so sweet and kind. If only those who knew her would hear you," Rodrigo muttered. "Did you say something?" "Nothing, except that you look stunning today." "Oh, you flatterer." Despite the fact that the man didn't have any tender or romantic feelings for his wife, he was good at pretending. He did it so well that his wife lived in the blissful belief that she had the most loving, caring, and attentive husband. The only thing missing for her complete happiness was a child. All the doctors unanimously confirmed that she was perfectly healthy and there were no medical reasons preventing conception. It seemed that the problem lay with her husband. However, after a year of futile attempts, even he gave up and underwent a complete examination. His health was also perfectly fine. The doctor said that it happens sometimes, and they just needed to wait, distract themselves, and relax. But Angelina couldn't relax. The idea of having a child gradually became an obsession. One day, while scrolling through social media, she came across a group where adoptive parents shared details about their new lives. Lives in which there was place for someone else's child who became their own. In the photos and videos, the frozen, closed off, and emotionless children gradually thawed, blossomed, started smiling, and became ordinary, joyful little ones. On that day, the idea of adoption didn't catch her too much, as she and her husband were young and healthy. They just needed to wait a little longer, as the doctors had advised. But something made her to visit that group every day. She already recognized many of the little ones and could appreciate their progress. And then, one day, she heard the story of a mother who struggled to conceive for a long time. She decided to pursue adoption and, during the process of paperwork, discovered that she was pregnant. Angelina delved into tons of information about this phenomenon. It turned out that it was far from uncommon, and she saw it as a way out. Besides, having 2 children meant twice the bliss. Even if she couldn't give birth to her own child, she would still have an adopted baby who would also need a family, care, love, and the support of parents. She decided to share her thoughts with her husband, but he didn't appreciate her enthusiasm. While he was willing to agree to a biological child, he couldn't agree to adopting someone else's child under any circumstances. Surprisingly, Angelina's father also expressed his strong opinion on the matter, seeing it as another whim of his daughter. "Sweetheart, you'll quickly get tired of taking care of someone else's child, spending time on them. You won't see your own or your husband's features in them. They will cry, and you'll get tired, and eventually, you'll want to return them. It's not all rosy in this matter. For every happy adoptive family, there are 5 or even 10 unhappy ones who regret their decision. You're wrong. I genuinely assess my abilities. I don't plan to adopt a child with disabilities. But that's only because all of you would be against it. I am capable of handling it. Darling, you couldn't even take care of a cat properly when you were a child. We bought you countless pets. I understand that you want a child, but it seems more like an unfulfilled whim that you're fixated on. Admit it to yourself, a child is not a doll or a hamster that you can take to play with and then return to the orphanage. I won't allow it. Fine, then I'll volunteer at the baby home and practice there. Have you gone crazy? Well, if you have nothing to do, go and work. Do you want me to hire you at my company? Dad, I've been working there for a long time already. Did you forget? Oh, right. In that case, go out and start your duties. All right, with the money I earn, I'll buy diapers and formula for the kids. Her husband and father, accustomed to seeing her as nothing more than a charming doll without much intelligence, did not expect such determination. The woman truly decided to test her willpower. She found an organization that collaborated with the orphanage on a voluntary basis. The volunteers, mostly young boys and girls, not only helped with gathering necessary supplies and providing meals, but also often took turns assisting the caretakers. They helped bathe and dress the little ones who were left without a mother, or simply carried them in their arms. Angelina decided to come in the evenings and read fairy tales to the tiny ones. Despite the fact that there were very young children, she knew how important this bedtime ritual was. She didn't remember her own mother well, but she remembered vividly that her mother read to her every day. One day, returning from her shift, she decided to take a walk and saw a woman with 2 children on a bench near the house, a 5-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. They were so adorable, eagerly telling their mother about the events that took place at their daycare, while their mother listened attentively and asked questions. Angelina was captivated by the scene. Standing nearby, she liked this family so much that she decided to approach them and introduce herself. Normally, she wouldn't do something like this, but some kind of emotional impulse overcame her. "Hello. I couldn't pass by without admiring you. What a beautiful family you are." The children hid behind their mother, not used to such attention from strangers. "Oh, did I scare you?" "I'm sorry." "It's okay, they're just very shy." The mother of the children seemed to be around the same age as Angelina. "I could have children of the same age as these kids," she thought sadly, but said aloud. "My name is Angelina. I'm a volunteer at the infant home. I decided to take a little walk and came across you. I'm Cristina." "And I'm Sandro." The boy became more confident and decided to introduce himself independently. He was handsome, with dark hair and blue eyes, reminding her of someone very familiar. But she couldn't quite remember who. While she had a fairly good memory for faces, she never remembered names and often struggled to recall where she knew a randomly encountered person from. However, it was a completely different feeling now. She had definitely never met the boy anywhere before, but his features were familiar to her. While she was lost in thought, the father approached the family, and Angelina realized who the little one reminded her of. It was Paulo, her husband's brother. She couldn't understand why the brothers stopped communicating many years ago. Angelina had never met him. When she and Rodrigo got married, Paulo was in the army. And then they moved abroad and returned recently. During all this time, she had only seen her husband's brother in photos, and she knew nothing about his family. When they visited his parents, they carefully avoided the topic of the younger brother's family. What could be wrong with them, the woman thought. They were a beautiful, young, and close-knit family with lovely little children. Why did her mother-in-law, who had always been kind to her, never mention grandchildren? Paulo and his wife didn't recognize who was in front of them. Even if they had seen her in a photo with her husband, they would hardly recognize her now, without makeup and styling, dressed modestly. At that moment, her phone rang, and Angelina waved goodbye to the new acquaintances and walked towards the playground. It was her husband calling. "Sweetie, where did you disappear to? You're not picking up the phone, I'm worried. Did something happen?" "I turned off my phone while putting the children to sleep." "Nothing happened. Listen, where are you right now?" "I'm at work. I'll be late today." "What's going on? Do you have plans for me?" Rodrigo's voice became softer and more mysterious. "Yes, I wanted to suggest that we visit someone today." "Really?" her husband said disappointedly. "And here I was hoping to spend some time alone." "Do I know the people you're planning to visit?" "I think so. It's your brother's family." "No." Rodrigo blurted out the response before he had a chance to think. "Why?" Angelina was taken aback by the quick and sharp answer. "I just saw them, they have such charming children. The boy looks just like you." Why should he look like me? Rodrigo realized that his voice could give him away, and there were hints of hysteria in it. He thought his wife had found out everything. Why did Angelina have to go to that infant home? He needed to put an end to this adoption circus as quickly as possible. He didn't need children at all, neither biological nor, especially, someone else's. Because you're his biological uncle, after all. Rodrigo let out a relieved sigh. She didn't know anything. Did my mother call you today? He cautiously asked, fearing to hear that she had already shared with daughter-in-law the wonderful idea of adopting a boy who remarkably resembled Rodrigo. Fortunately, they could forget about that idea now. His wife had seen Sandro, which meant she could figure everything out. No, should she have? Maybe we should visit her too. We haven't seen her in a while, after all. Angelina genuinely wondered why her husband's relatives had such an unwillingness to communicate with each other. Listen, I have a wonderful idea. Let's have a big family dinner tomorrow. We can invite my dad, your parents, your brother and his family. After all, we haven't met them yet. It's strange, don't you think? You're brothers, but you haven't seen each other for so many years. Christina and I just met today for the first time. But we've been relatives for many years. I would love to get to know your nephews. Sandro is such a handsome boy, and his little sister is absolutely charming. I didn't even get a chance to ask her name. Dolly. Mother says she doesn't resemble her father at all, Rodrigo absent-mindedly mentioned, desperately trying to redirect his wife's thoughts and distract her from this wonderful idea of gathering his mother, father-in-law, and ex-mistress with their illegitimate child at the same table. Even a fish on a hot frying pan would have a better chance of survival than him in that situation. Yes, she's the spitting image of her mother. By the way, Christina is a very beautiful young woman. I would have never guessed that she has such grown-up children at such a young age. How old is Christina? She's your age. Darling, I've missed you so much. Let's spend the evening together instead, just you and me. We haven't gone out together in so long. You don't want me to meet your relatives? His spouse directly asked. My mother and my brother's wife have a strained relationship. She never accepted his choice. Besides, my mother isn't even sure if Dolly is my brother's biological daughter. It's such a story, and I don't want to involve you and your father in it. It seems he's not thrilled with me enough. Why do you think that? Dad always speaks highly of you. Well, praising is one thing, but appointing someone to a responsible position is a different story. By the way, you didn't answer. When will you be coming home? Let me send a driver for you. All right, I'll wait, Angelina replied. Yielding to another fleeting impulse, Angelina decided to approach her husband's brother's family once again and introduce herself. The children were still playing on the playground while the parents sat on a bench, engaged in a heated discussion. As she got closer, she overheard a phrase. They won't be able to do it. Taking a child away is not that simple. Who could even think of such horror? Taking children away from their parents flashed through Angelina's mind. Hello again. I didn't have a chance to introduce myself earlier. I was interrupted by a phone call. Good evening, Paulo and Cristina said in unison, not fully understanding what this woman wanted from them. I'm Angelina, Rodrigo's, your brother's wife. The woman decided to introduce herself right away. The expressions on the couple's faces turned equally frightened and hostile. They exchanged glances and almost simultaneously said, You won't take him away, we won't let you to. After that, the woman rushed to the playground right to the children, and Paulo turned to Angelina, who was utterly confused, and repeated, We won't give Sandro to you. He is our son, no matter what my mother does. I don't understand what you're talking about. Why are you speaking like this? I have no intention of taking anyone from you. I just recognized you and wanted to invite you over to get to know each other. We are close relatives, yet we've never met in person. It feels strange to me. So, I thought I'd take this opportunity to introduce myself. I have no malicious intentions, I swear to you. Apparently, the woman spoke very convincingly. Paulo looked at his approaching wife and said, "She must have been kept in the dark about the brilliant plan." And he suggested, turning to his brother's wife, "Let's go, we will tell you why we don't communicate with my parents and brother." Surprisingly, the problems brought Paulo and Cristina closer. He stopped being jealous of her, and Cristina felt immense support from her husband. Now they were a truly united family. The conversation lasted the entire evening. While Cristina changed and fed the babies, Paulo sat with Angelina in the kitchen. Then Cristina turned on cartoons for the children on the TV and joined them. Angelina was horrified by what she heard. Her whole ideal world turned out to be a heap of lies. Her husband had been lying to her for years, constantly betraying her. And her mother-in-law, she didn't even want to think about her. How fortunate it was that she happened to stop near Paulo and Cristina's house today. Despite the horror of the story, she had no reason not to believe it. There was too much evidence. But above all, she was struck by her mother-in-law's cynicism. She wanted Angelina to raise a child born from her husband's lover. She planned to hide so many shattered lives behind the picture of her and Rodrigo's family happiness. Angelina looked at the children, who were engrossed in watching cartoons. Sandro had her husband's profile, his eyes, hair, and the shape of his head. It was astonishing how the child resembled a father who didn't want him. Her husband had tried to call her several times, but she ignored the calls and eventually turned off her phone. She didn't want to see or hear anyone, but staying alone now was frightening. Then an idea came to her mind. "Guys, can I stay with you tonight? I can't go home, and I don't want to go to my father's." "Of course, stay. You are the only ones who told me the whole truth. And now we are not strangers, we share so many secrets." The woman smiled sadly and went out to the balcony. She wanted to take a breath and gather her thoughts. At that moment, someone knocked heavily on the door. It seemed that the person outside was determined to break the door down. Paulo looked through the peephole and saw his enraged brother on the stairs. Opening the door, he stepped outside, not allowing Rodrigo to enter the apartment. "Are you crazy, banging on the door like that? Our little children are sleeping. Where's my wife?" Rodrigo was clearly worried. The driver had called, saying that Angelina was not at the specified address. And that could only mean one thing: she had gone to talk to his brother. The fact that she hadn't answered her phone for several hours only confirmed his suspicion. Just in case, Rodrigo called her father and a couple of friends. She was nowhere to be found, and no one had seen her. After getting the address from his mother, Rodrigo rushed after his wife, fully aware that today was likely to be the last day of his married life, his career, and everything else that surrounded him. The apartment, the car, the vacations, he had all of that solely because of his wife. It was strange, but he didn't feel regret now. The lie, like a huge snowdrift, weighed him down, preventing him from living a normal life. Now this life would collapse, and what would remain afterward was yet to be seen. "She's with us, but it's better if you don't see her right now. She knows everything." What exactly does she know? "Everything," the brother simply said and continued, "about your cheats, about Sandro being your son. About how our mother decided to take him away from us and give him to you. Why did you tell her that?" Rodrigo's voice held no anger, only a dreadful tiredness. "Do you think she didn't deserve it? She truly loves you. And she wanted a child from you, not for her own whims. Why do all of you treat Christina this way? You know, I also didn't notice under Mom's influence how hard it was for Christina all these years. And she endured it. If you only knew what she had to go through. I'm even glad that Mom came up with this terrible plan of adoption. It brought us closer. If you love your wife, fight for her, ask for forgiveness, beg her. But if you only need her as a means to achieve your goals, never approach her again. Angelina is strong. She will have a hard time, it will be painful and sad, but she will get through it." "How do you know all of this?" "You don't know her. It's you who doesn't know her, and in a few hours, we have learned more about her than you have in 7 years. I want to talk to her. Angelina doesn't want to. She'll spend the night with us. If she's ready tomorrow, I'll call you. Is Sandro really looks like me? Yes, but if you dare try to take him away from me or reveal the truth, I'll crush you to dust. With the calm certainty with which his brother uttered these words, Rodrigo understood their mother's plan was doomed to fail from the start. His brother had become the best father the boy could ever imagine. He even felt a pang of jealousy his son would grow up before his eyes without the possibility of knowing the truth. We've changed the documents for him. Now Sandro is my son. I wouldn't even recommend doing a DNA test. It won't help you. Initially, I was against the idea that came into Mom's head. She seems to have serious problems in her mind. I would have her see specialists. Well, have her too. I don't want to have any more interaction with her. As for our father, yes, he was very happy when he visited us the other day. He finally met his grandchildren. But as for our mother, she no longer exists for us. She was putting a terror to Christina's life for many years and considered me nothing from the moment I was born. We haven't lost anything, on the contrary, we've gained. Our father dared to defy her. If you want, you can come occasionally, but I warn you, if you ever mention who you are to Sandro. I'm his uncle and I have no intention of claiming more. Good. For the first time in his life, Rodrigo didn't want to be arrogant and condescending towards his brother. He suddenly felt envy, a beloved, loving wife, children, a cozy home. Even his wife found refuge and solace here. But for him, supposedly a blood brother, there was no place here. A wide and deep abyss separated them. I will try to talk to her. Paulo seemed to read his brother's thoughts, but for now, you should not meet. Today, you should also think about what to do next. Obviously, things won't be the same as before. But if you don't need her and you're with her for the sake of her father's money and opportunities, at least be honest with her. You can achieve everything in life without her father and his position. Paulo said the last sentence just to offer support. But it echoed in Rodrigo's mind throughout the evening and the whole night. In the morning, Angelina left for a friend's place outside the city without informing anyone except Paulo and Cristina of her whereabouts. That day, parents had to work late, and the children were going to be picked up from daycare by their grandmother. Walking happily along the path, the children and their grandmother reminisced about the day, shared news, joked, and laughed. The second grandmother unexpectedly appeared in their path. Grabbing the boy's hand rudely, she pulled him towards her, trying to separate his other little hand from his beloved grandmother's grip. Come here. Get you hands of the boy. He should be somewhere else right now. The woman's appearance, to put it mildly, was far from decent. What are you doing? Let Sandro go. Christina's mother began frantically looking around for help. They were just a few meters away from their home. In that moment, she spotted a woman sitting on a bench in the playground and decided to call for her help. Help! This crazy woman wants to take the child. The woman turned towards them and, as if recognizing them, quickly ran towards them. However, Paulo's mother, upon seeing the woman, quickly changed her expression. Angelina, my dear. What are you doing here? Rosendo has been looking for you all day. Aunt Angelina, you're back? Stay with us again tonight. It's so much fun with you. Hugging the children, detaching her mother-in-law's hand from the boy's hand, Angelina turned to her husband's relative. He won't find me anymore. I filed for divorce, packed his things, and already took them to your apartment. My husband didn't even bother asking what caused it. What documents? Darling, what kind of joke is this? You love each other so much. Yes, I loved him. But your son completely didn't know that feeling. There's no need to persuade me, I know everything. And about Rodrigo's child. The woman gave a significant look to the boy who stood between the two grandmothers, unaware of what was happening. And about his other adventures. This is my Paulo and his wife. They turned you against me, against Rosendo. I'll show them a good time. They will crawl back to me on their knees." Shouting these words, the woman suddenly contorted her face into a horrifying grimace, clutched her chest, and collapsed. After a heart attack that kept her bedridden for almost a year, Paulo and Rodrigo's mother never returned home. She was transferred to a specialized facility due to signs of mental disorder caused by severe stress. The main factor that contributed to her mental health decline was the disintegration of her elder son's family. The former daughter-in-law became a friend to the younger's family. She continued to assist volunteers and worked as a child psychologist. It was this work that granted her everything she had dreamed of: a loving and beloved husband and a little daughter.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.